Well, welcome to tonight's Parent Night on Student-Led IEPs. I'm Maria Wiscombe, and I'm the Utah Parent Center Parent Consultant for Families in Alpine School District. Um, I can help families navigate IEPs, the school resources, as well as help you connect to community resources. And you can contact me. I will put my contact information in the chat box, so I'll put that there. But tonight, Jake Hunsaker, he's a teacher over at ATEC, and he will be doing our presentation. So I'm just going to let him take the lead now.
All right, thanks, Maria. Um, so we are talking about student-led IEPs, and I am Jake Hunsaker. And like Maria said, I am teaching at ATEC East in American Fork, and I've been there for about 8 years now. Let's see, there we go. So a little bit about me. I've been teaching transition age students for about 10 years. I was teaching middle school students at Dan Peterson for 2 years before I got moved over to ATEC. I do have a master's of education in special education with an emphasis in transition. And I've done about 200 IEPs so far in my career, and over 85% of them have been student-led to some degree or another. So, all right. So our roadmap for tonight, we're going to talk first about the research that is why we should be doing student-led IEPs. Then we would be talking about what a student-led IEP might look like, how teachers can help students lead their own IEPs, and then how you as parents can help students lead their IEPs. And then we can have any additional questions that we haven't already asked. Okay, so the research. So one of the studies in 2010 said that there's a strong positive correlation between student involvement in the IEP and academic achievement. It kind of gives the students a sense of ownership over their IEP goals. And they can't just be like, oh, I don't want to work on these. So it gives them a sense of ownership and it increases their academic achievement. In 2009, a study said student participation had several positive effects on the IEP process. A, the meetings became student-centered. B, elementary students had the opportunity to use self-determination skills in an authentic setting. And C, adult participants noted increased collaborative problem solving. It's so important that if the student is present in the IEP and participating, the IEP becomes more about them and less about goals. And it also helps those self-determination skills that are so important to learn that sometimes we don't think about until later in life. It gives students an earlier chance to develop those. And yeah, the collaborative problem solving, once it becomes a discussion and not just a teacher dictating what the IEP is going to be, and more communication happens because of it. So that's great.
Hey, Jake, can I add something real quick here?
Yes, you can.
So I'm able to attend IEP meetings throughout the district of all grades, age levels. And I've seen where even a fifth grader has come into the meeting and just participated for about 5 to 7 minutes. But the student came in, introduced themselves, introduced their strengths, and then talked about ways that she felt like she needed help, and even offered a couple of ideas to the team about accommodations and things like that. And so even at fifth grade, students can participate and be a part of their IEPs, but it really set the meeting in a good light and helped the team stay focused on her, on the student.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. The next quote from 2007 says, students are more likely to take ownership of the educational planning when they are actively involved in the process. Like I said earlier, them taking ownership is so key to success in the classroom. I've had students where if they don't have buy-in or ownership of the goals, they don't want to participate in the IEP goals. They're very resistant, as opposed to those who have a say in what they're working on. They are more involved and engaged, and it gives me as a teacher the opportunity when they do say I don't want to work on this, say to come back and be like, you were part of the team, you're the one that came up with this goal, you said you wanted to work on it, we need to do that. So it's great to have them in that driver's seat. 2002 says when students with disabilities are involved in their own IEPs, they tended to be more aware of their disability, its impact on their school performance, and their need for self-advocacy. Working with 18 to 22-year-olds, the most frustrating situations are when the student comes and they say, I don't know why I'm here. I don't even have a disability. Because we've tried to protect them from that sometimes. As parents, as teachers, oh yeah, okay, you don't have a disability, we're just going to help you a little bit. But if they're involved in the IEP and realize that the disability isn't a negative, like a super negative thing, that it's just something that they learn differently and they need additional helps to be able to participate in their education, and that they know how to ask for help. Um, that is what they need, especially as they transition from school to the real world. Um, because nobody's going to do it for them necessarily when they're by themselves or when they're out in the community. They need to be able to advocate for their own needs and realize that they do have them. Okay. And this quote from 2004 says, student-led IEP meetings provide opportunities for students to learn and participate in important social skills. I realize when students come to me that usually they've been able to slide through presentations. If they're in a regular education class setting that requires a presentation and they've been put in a group, they don't end up having to participate in that presentation. They get to sit back. They don't have to learn the skills that are being taught to their peers. In an IEP, they're the one that has to present it. They're the ones that have to lead it. These skills are more likely to be developed. They're able to figure out how to have a conversation in a professional setting, how to handle some problem solving, disagreements, making sure that their opinion is heard and listening to other people's opinions, and going forward with a plan when taking all perspectives into account. Some things that are very, very useful throughout their lives. And I know there is like, okay, when are these quotes done? But I just wanted to really stress the importance that the research does emphasize student-led IEPs. But here's one from 2006 that says, while students lead their IEP meetings, they demonstrate self-determination skills like goal setting, planning, self-evaluation, public speaking, self-advocacy, and meditation skills. All important skills as they move forward in life, whatever their disability, to be able to do some of this at any level is very important. Okay, 1997. So as far back as 1997, they said, research shows by promoting self-determination in adolescents with disabilities, the more likely their productive adult outcomes, such as employment, independent living, quality of life, and life satisfaction will increase. So as we help them take charge of their education and lead those meetings, we're improving the chances of them having employment, having a good quality of life, and being satisfied with that life. So key things for these students. Okay, so that was the last quote. Hopefully I didn't put anyone to sleep or bore you with all of that research, but I thought it was important. Now to kind of show you what they look like. First, I'm going to show you what mine kind of look like, what my process of helping a student have a self-led IEP really looks like. And then we'll talk about possible adaptations for functioning level, age, all of that. So first, there's a spectrum here of what student-led IEPs might look like. The bottom of the spectrum is that the IEP takes place without the student present. That shouldn't be that the student hadn't been involved at all in the process. Hopefully they were involved in, at least through assessments, where we determined what they need to work on based on data from assessing their current abilities. But that's not ideal for a student-led IEP. And then you have the other extreme where the student is present and takes the responsibility for most of the process. I have done a lot of student-led IEPs. Very few have been all the way to that student taking most of the responsibility of the process. Most of my students have fallen either the middle where the student presents and actively participates to student presents and takes responsibility for one piece of the process. But I mean, you don't want to be at the very end, and you want to be as far along as you can on the spectrum to give the student more opportunities to be successful. So my process, I start out talking to the student. Yep, I talk to the student first about their transition plan goals. And that's because I've only worked with students that have a transition plan that involves a long-term plan for employment, a plan for education after they graduate or age out of the system for school, and where they want to live after they finish school. So I start with those questions, and then those questions help lead to any IEP goals on what they need to learn to be able to reach those long-term plans. Once they start having a transition plan, the IEP goals should really be there to support that transition plan, not a transition plan's made and now we're creating IEP goals without even thinking about the transition plan again.
And Jake, the transition plans start around when the student turns 14 or 15, right?
Yep, 14.
So in middle school or junior high.
Yep. Yeah. So after I talk with the student and kind of create a plan, I then talk to the parents about the transition plan goals and the IEP goals that the student has come up with. And then I get the parents' input. Sometimes my students are pretty sly, and they make this IEP goal that they can already do. Like, I want to learn how to do laundry. And then I talk to the parents and they're like, they do their laundry every week. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that would be a bad IEP goal. And sometimes the parents are like, yeah, that is a need, but here's another need that's really big that would hinder them from living independently in a supported apartment, or they help provide feedback on what the student has come up with. And then talking with the parent, I then kind of go back to the student and revise any of the IEP goals that might need to be revised. And then we move on to helping the student create an IEP PowerPoint. I kind of have an outline PowerPoint that the students can add the information for their specific IEP, as well as change the background, add pictures to just make it their own when they present during the IEP meeting. After we've created that PowerPoint, it's nice to review the PowerPoint at least once with the student in a practice. And then we have that scheduled IEP meeting and let the student take charge, with them knowing that we're there to help support them if they get stuck. or tongue-tied, or they can't remember during the practice where they're supposed to go next. So that's kind of my process for helping the student with a student-led IEP. This form right here is what I fill out with the student when I sit down with them, asking them about their transition plan goals, just writing down a few notes. And then the IEP goals. At ATEC, there's not a common core like math, science, writing. Our four areas are education and training, jobs, personal life, and living on your own. So this form could be adapted, or a teacher could create their own to help a student go through that process of if they need to have their 2 reading goals, 2 writing goals, 2 math goals, and a independent living goal, then that can be adapted. So here is this is the first PowerPoint that I have the students to be able to fill out. They can either put their own name in there, or they can just say my, because they're the ones reading it. And then we advance and we introduce whoever's present at the IEP. The LEA is usually a principal or a representative from the district. Usually the student already knows this person from the administration. The special ed teacher, the parent, the vocational rehabilitation counselor, which I encourage once they start having a transition plan, you should be inviting a voc rehab counselor to the meeting as well. A regular education teacher, if they're still in high school or middle school or elementary school, regular ed teacher should be present. And then anybody else, related services like a speech teacher, adaptive PE teacher, if they have vision or occupational therapy, any related service person would be put on here so that the student could then introduce the members of the team. Then I usually have the student turn the time over to either the teacher, the special ed teacher, or at ATEC, our principal likes to be involved, and he likes to go over the procedural safeguards. So usually they turn it over to him, and he goes through that. And then once that's done, then they can either turn it over to the speech teacher or whatever related services they have. After talking about through the related services, part of the IEP is reporting on their progress that they've made on their previous goals. So there's slides that would explain the progress that they would fill out. And then after the previous IEP goals have been reviewed, we start on the IEP. Here's where they talk about what their goals for the transition plan are. Then there's more transition plans, like how old are they, who has guardianship of them. We talk about how they're going to age out of services when they're 22, when they're going to graduate from post-high, or this is usually an age out day. And then what kind of document they're going to be receiving, whether it be a certificate of completion or a high school diploma or an adaptive diploma. Okay. Periodically through the PowerPoint, we have scheduled asking if anybody has questions or anybody wants to make a comment, just so that there can definitely be room for discussion. After the transition plan, then we go into the actual goals. The I can statement. Every goal should have a present level, is what we call them. And the present level should include what they can do currently, what they need to be able to do, and need help doing. And that's why they're having special ed services, and then the goal. And so I have the student say what they can do, what they need help with, and the goal to support that need. For each of the goal areas, whether it be our 4 areas or the reading, math, writing, science, independent living. And then after the talking about the goals, we have the questions again. This is part the student can do. A lot of my students don't like to do this part, so they turn the time over to me. It's kind of like the small print on the service and placement page that you're supposed to sign at the end of the IEP that talks about when they'll attend, how many minutes a day, any accommodations or modifications that they'll have in regular education, that sort of thing. Um, the related services that they have or they don't have, um, what state testing they would need to be participating in. This is a one that we always have. Excuse me, because at ATEC we don't have any state or district-wide testing because of their transition age. If they have any special factors, that's like a behavior plan, assistive technology, communication services, that would go in this area. And then if they qualify for summer school or not based on their IEP. And if they're going to maintain or change their current placement status. So it's a lot of the fine print that the students don't like to go over, and I give them the opportunity to turn it over to me so that I have a chance to talk a little bit. And then the questions and comments part. And I usually, after we've talked about things, have them turn it over to vocational rehabilitation. Our counselor's name is Catherine Owen at ATEC East. And she's able to hear their goals, their transition plan. Sometimes they already have services with her. And so then she can talk about what they've been doing with Voc Rehab and how we as a school can support the student. But if they don't have the services already, that's where she talks about what she does and how they can fill out and apply for that service. And then for students that are of transition age, they should always have the parent manual and a transition checklist that either the transition specialist or the teacher should go over, some set things and services that are available outside of the school district. And then they turn it over to me to get the IEP all signed. Once it's all signed, it's over and we dismiss. Sorry, I went too far. So that's kind of how I do mine. I do have students that, for the most part, can communicate verbally. A lot of them have some level of reading skills. I have some that can barely read, all the way up to those that are reading novels with me. So I just adapt it based on their need. But some adaptations that could be added for ability level could be if they have a hard time communicating or reading, using some kind of speech device where they can just tap the button and it will issue a pre-recorded part of the IEP so that they're feeling like they're the one leading it. And something that I've seen teachers do that is an irritation to me. If it's a male student, the voice that is on the speech device should be a male voice. If it's a female student, it should be a female voice, just so they take ownership of that. Other types of things that are recordings. If it's a type of goal that it's a performance space that the student can show that they can do this goal, we can even take a video of them completing the goal and show that in the IEP to show what they're able to do. If they're shy and they don't like to talk in front of a lot of people, we can do a pre-recording that they advance through in the meeting itself. If there's behavior concerns that they're not going to be able to sit through the meeting very long, at least have them prepared to lead as much of the meeting as they're able to, and having them at least in the meeting part of the time. I really don't like going to, sometimes I visit high schools and go to their IEP meetings as a representative of ATEC. And it's really hard for me to go to an IEP meeting and not see the student there. I mean, if they're in high school, they should be present at least part of the time, regardless of their ability level. So Are there any questions about concerns that you have and what possible ideas of adaptations that I might be able to share with? You know, like if you're thinking about your child and the hangups of if you've had that thought, oh yeah, my child wouldn't be able to do this. Share what your hangups are, and maybe we can think about some adaptations together.
We have a small group, so I can, if you want to, I'm letting you unmute if you'd like to. If you have any questions. Um, One thing I was thinking is some of the IEP meetings that I've been at the junior high level, I've seen some students be very involved, mainly because they need to get on board with what the team is planning. And the thing I like about that, like what you've talked about, Jake, is that that gives them a buy-in, and they're the ones that are agreeing or disagreeing, you know, saying, well, this would work or this won't work. And I've seen the team work really well with the student in involving them and asking them directly. And sometimes it's hard for parents to not want to step in and answer for the student, since most of the time we're used to doing that as answering for our kids. But I've seen it super effective, and the team come up with some great collaboration ideas to make some things that seemed impossible initially come together for the students to help them be more successful. So, you know, just the fact of them being in the room has made that possible, but also getting their buy-in and their input on how they feel. So they feel like the team's not just making decisions for them, but they're very much a part of the team and making and helping make those decisions of things that they want to do. So not so much about adaptations, but just what I've seen happen in the past.
Yeah. Anybody
I
else?
don't see any questions.
Okay. We
Oh,
will.
yep. Yes, we do.
We do.
Um, so one question. My autistic son is only 4, but I brought him with me to his IEP meetings so he is comfortable with the setting and will hopefully be more prepared to participate more and more over time. I love that.
That is awesome.
That is great. And then we had a hand raised. Callie, you want to go ahead? I think you can unmute. There you go.
There we go. Okay. My child is in grade school. And so what does an IEP look like at the junior high level? Like how many teachers are participating? Is it only the ones where they have special needs in like reading and math? Or do they involve all those teachers?
Um, so I have been to a middle school IEP other than one at Dan Peterson. But I know at the high school, they don't necessarily involve all of the regular education teachers. They usually just try to have one come. As far as special ed teachers, all of the teachers providing special education services should be part of the IEP meeting.
And I've seen it where if a student is struggling in a couple of gen ed classes, that they'll try to pull in those teachers. So at any secondary level. But yeah, by law, really, under IDEA, there needs to be the LEA rep, the parent, the a gen ed teacher, the special ed teacher, and then the student where appropriate. So secondary on up, that all secondary students should be there for at least part of the time. And then so those 4 plus the student are mandatory people that need to be in the IEP meeting the whole time. And then any related service providers like speech or OT, school psychologist, like that. So yeah, so not all of the teachers come, but you can always, if you have a concern about a specific class, you can always request to have that teacher come as well.
I was going to say that, so thank you. Anything else before we move on? Okay. Um, so how teachers can help. Um, just a minute. One of the video bars in the way. Okay. So the first part is to explain what the process is and obtain a commitment from the student to participate. So first, not just saying, oh, you're going to lead your IEP meeting and leave it at that, but explaining the process. I usually do that through the PowerPoint, like this is how the meeting goes, and getting that student to be on board for leading the IEP. Describing the IEP meeting, demonstrate how to participate, and role play with the student, all very important. Sometimes the IEP is a whirlwind and it's like I got a hold of the parent and they say, I can only meet in 2 days. Like I need to meet 2 days from now. And I don't always get to the role playing part with the student. And those meetings don't go as well as when you're able to get them to practice. And then help the student to do a self-inventory and plan for the conference similar to the way parents and teachers do, to kind of review what their goals are, what their needs are, what they want out of the IEP. And the simple form that I have them fill out would be either the first form, talking it through with them, or the IEP form. But just giving them things to complete or things to kind of fill in, not just say, you're leading the IEP meeting, these are your goals, let's go. And then how you as a parent can help. First of all, encourage your child's teacher to have a student-led IEP. We would love for these to be very common, but we have found that they are not. And that's not great. So as a parent, encourage your child's teacher to have a student-led IEP when they call and be like, hey, I want my student to kind of have the role of leading this IEP. What can we do to support that? Number 2 is include your child in discussions at home about what their goals are for the employment, continuing education, and living independently. Those are the transition plan goals. To kind of have that in mind. For the majority of students with disabilities are employable. Sometimes parents don't realize that because they think of traditional employment, but with the help of vocational rehabilitation, employment is very achievable for the majority of students with disabilities. Continuing education does not necessarily mean college. It doesn't mean, well, you're going to go to UVU in computer science and you're going to get a master's degree. It doesn't mean that necessarily. It could be simply you like art. Well, Hobby Lobby has art classes. Let's take art classes in the community at these different craft stores that might have art classes. Or there's some places that have cooking classes in the community. There's also UVU has adult education classes where you as a parent can actually go to those classes with with your child. And not well known, those adult ed classes, you can also get accommodations through disability resource centers at the college level, even for those ones that don't require them to be enrolled in UVU. And then living independently doesn't necessarily mean moving out and going into an apartment. It's a variety of continuing to live at home, but now they're going to be an adult and they should have some more responsibilities at home than they had as a child. All the way to possibly moving out in an apartment all by themselves or with roommates. Maybe living in a supported apartment where a company has an employee that checks on them or is in the apartment at all times with them and their roommates. It doesn't just have to be, well, they're not going to live independently. They are going to live independently to some degree. And then the last one is to take a tiny step back and help your child take the lead. So something I've seen a lot with parents is I'll ask a question And I'm used to this all day where I ask a student a question and I wait for an answer. Um, a lot of people call that awkward silence. I'm just giving them wait time. I'm giving them a way to formulate the answer in their head that they want to be able to give it out. And also letting them know that nobody else is answering this question for you, so you're going to actually have to answer it. But in the IEP meeting, sometimes with parents, is I ask a question of the student, and the student looks at me, and they're going through that wait time. But then the parents are like they step in and hurry and answer it for the student, which doesn't necessarily help the student feel empowered. And it also helps teach them that I don't have to participate if I don't want to, because mom or dad is here to answer my questions for me. But a different tactic would be when somebody asks the student a question and they aren't giving an answer, or maybe even they look at you to give you the answer for them. Instead of giving the answer, be like, oh yeah, so your teachers asked this question. What are your thoughts on that? To let them know that you're not planning to answer it and you are planning on having them answer it.
And Jake, there's a comment in the chat box that goes right smack along with what you've been talking about. She said that she's a high school sped teacher of students with severe cognitive disabilities. And basically the same thing. How would you suggest I help parents step back and let their child answer? Far too often I ask a direct question to the student and the parent immediately jumps in with an answer. So I like the wait time, and even maybe explaining at the beginning of the meeting that I'm going to be asking the student questions, but I always give them some time to process and answer. And so don't feel awkward when we have some silence in between the question and waiting for the student to answer, maybe like that.
Yeah, I would encourage you to be open with the parents, not necessarily in the meeting and not necessarily in front of everyone. Maybe in a phone call or something with the parent and say, hey, we're trying this student-led IEP, or this is going to be a student-led IEP. So let me just kind of help prepare you a little bit. So usually with these IEPs, when the student is leading, they're used to having a lot of help from mom and dad sometimes. So if you could kind of take a step back a little bit and let them kind of, like, we're preparing them and they know what they're supposed to do. It might take them a little while. And when we ask questions, let's try to get them to formulate the answer first. And then after they give an answer, then add on what you're thinking about that question as well. So just open with the parents. I've never had a parent complain about one of my IEPs. Um, and that's not to brag. I involve parents in the IEP process really heavily. I have a sister who her son is 15 now. He has Down syndrome, autism, oppositional defiant disorder, attention deficit disorder. He's got all of it. So she calls me a lot to help her with an IEP process. And she tells me what happened. And I'm like, wait, they didn't call you and ask you what you would like to see in the goals? Wait, they didn't involve you in that? They just told you to be here at this time and you showed up? That's the wrong way to do an IEP meeting. Make sure you're including that parent before the meeting very heavily. Make sure the draft of the IEP goes home. And let the parent know that they can contact you before the IEP meeting if they have any questions or concerns. If the parent feels like they're being heard, they'll definitely give the opportunity for the student to take charge.
Well, and as a parent, if you haven't had communication, if you know the IEP meeting is coming up and you haven't had that communication with the teacher, don't be afraid to reach out and offer your suggestions and ideas for goals, because they may not know what is important for you to have your child learn to be more independent. And so it's important for you to give that input, and then you can always request a draft copy of the IEP as well. So, don't wait for the teacher always to reach out to you, because you can reach out to them.
Yeah, most definitely. Um, all right. So we are at the end of my PowerPoint. If I haven't answered or addressed something that you were really hoping to learn about student-led IEPs, ask. And if I can't answer your questions, maybe Maria can. I have I see that my student teacher that I have this semester is on with us. Maybe she has some insight because she's been helping me do these IEPs as well.
Well, and while you're formulating questions, I'm going to bring up a poll if you don't mind just answering the few questions on that poll. But we can unmute. I think you have the power to unmute yourselves if you'd like to ask the questions, or if you'd like to put them in the chat box. That's perfect too. So I'm turning the poll on right now. I think it's just 5 questions, so it should be quick. So the gal that's the SPED teacher, she said that she would love to have parents more involved on the front end, even approach her. So I like that. She said that she does send home a questionnaire, but often I get very vague responses back.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is, as a teacher, the parents who aren't being involved is very, very difficult for us. I understand that. Um, I'm sure Natalie Atkinson is my student teacher. I'm sure she's chuckling because we had an IEP this Monday, um, and we had sent out a questionnaire 2 weeks before. And this is one of my students that's participating online. And I say participate very loosely because she has not participated at all online. She's new to my class this year. I have no data. I have not met her, but I still have to hold an IEP. So I send the questionnaire home to I call the mom. She says yes. She sets up the IEP. I said I'm going to email you this questionnaire to fill out. I email it 2 weeks in advance. Nothing. The next week happens. I remind her about it. Nothing. Um, and I'm bad. I forgot that I had the IEP until Natalie that morning says, "So our IEPs this morning, right?" And I'm like, "Yes," and I still haven't gotten anything back. Well, the parent, I emailed the parent again. She did finally give me something, and we ended up writing the IEP in the IEP meeting, which I hate doing. But yeah, it's hard, and sometimes maybe that's what you do. You have the IEP, you write it with the parent and the student in the meeting sometimes, which is hard. Um, but yeah, try to involve the parents as much as possible. If they're not participating, there's not much you can do, but you can always involve the student. They should be there. Well, okay. I say that after my example of not ever having the student step foot in my classroom. But if the student is present, you should always have them involved in the process. And if mom and dad don't like it, then we make it adaptations on the fly in the meeting.
Well, and I've found too that IEP meetings go much more smoothly if there's been conversation with parents, between the parents and teachers, and there's been a draft IEP, and the parents have had a chance to look over it and give their input. So yeah, so as parents, don't hesitate to reach out to the
Yeah.
teacher.
I prefer a heavily involved parent to a parent that I can't get a hold of.
Yeah. Well, I had another thought come to my mind too, about especially students who are college bound. So students that may typically be receiving resource support at the high school level and going to college. I've talked with a few people that work for the accessibility centers at colleges. They're either called accessibility centers or disability resource centers, so basically the same thing. But students can receive accommodations at the college level and can request those through the accessibility centers. But the accessibility centers communicate with the students. They don't communicate with the parents. And so that's another reason why it's so important to get your students involved in IEP meetings, because then that teaches them how to advocate for themselves, and especially makes them aware of the accommodations that they do need. Because if they don't know what they need and why they need them, then they're not going to be able to take that to the college level. Even the workplace can provide some accommodations too. But yeah, if they don't know what they need and haven't had the practice of advocating for themselves, that isn't, it just doesn't automatically happen. So
Yeah.
I've seen
And
that's another reason why it's so good to have them involved.
yeah, and you mentioned UVU and the Accessibility Center, but UVU is starting a new program
Oh yeah.
this upcoming year called Wolverines Elevated, which is for those with some more severe disabilities that they get to have a college experience. I think it's a 3-year experience. The 3rd year is taking classes to be certified in a type of trade. But it's, yeah, even there, they need these skills to advocate for themselves. And the more prepared they are, the more likely that they would be to get accepted into that kind of a program.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's great. Well, are there any other questions? I did post to the chat box, and I believe in your email that you received about the meeting with the link, that there was a link for the handouts. So you should have access to that. And please feel free to share them with your friends, with those of you who are teachers. Feel free to share the link with your students and their parents. We will post this video on that link once we get it worked out. And so you can refer parents to it as well.
And if you're a teacher in the Alpine School District and you're trying to do a student-led IEP and you're not sure and you're questioning, you can always reach out to me. I'm in Alpine. It's my email is rhunsaker@alpinedistrict.org, and I could help you if you wanted to go through your first student-led IEP.
Okay, so we've got a couple more questions in the chat, and thanks, Jake, for sharing that. I'm cutting and pasting the link for the handouts. And then there was a question as, are there any books or resources you recommend on understanding IEPs for parents? So yes, so the Utah Parent Center, I'll go get this link real quick, but that's what the Utah Parent Center does, is help families navigate resources through the schools. And we have a resource page on IEPs. We also have a parent handbook on that page called Parents as Partners in the IEP Process. And here's the link for the handbook and all the IEP resources. And then you are always welcome to, if you're a teacher, if you're a parent, you're more than welcome to call me anytime. And if you're a teacher that you feel a parent needs some extra support, you can either give them my contact information, or you can also ask them for permission to pass their information on to me. I get referrals both ways. So sometimes it's just one too many more things for a parent to make another call, and they feel overwhelmed. And so sometimes it just is helpful for the teacher to get the parents' permission to pass their information on to me. So, all right, do those resources that I posted in the chat box help answer your questions? Any last burning?
I did have a question about how long it usually takes to help a student create their IEPs. Because I already have the PowerPoint kind of created and it's like a fill in the blank for their personal stuff. And the interview usually goes pretty fast. I would say total time, maybe 2 to 3 hours over a couple weeks time frame.
So you just try to spread it out in chunks.
Yeah, I
So you're
don't try
not
to do
just
it all
sitting
at once.
down and plowing through it.
No,
Yeah,
no.
that's great. That's great. Good question. All right. Anything else? Well, thank you.
Um,
Oh, do you?
Sorry, on your resource page, does it have the Utah Transition Action Guide?
That is going to be, I'll get it.
I just know that breaks down everybody's role in the IEP. That might be useful for parents to
Okay. So
understand.
that's going to be on our, I believe, on our transition to adult life page. Let me just, yep, it is. Okay. So I'm going to just post the transition to adult life link and then scroll down. Transition, what was it called? Transition
I think it's the
action?
Utah Transition Action Guide. UTAG is what they like to call it.
Let me make sure that's what that is. That I just, yeah, from the Utah State Board of Education.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on this link that I just added. And that is a great resource because it walks through pretty much every age/grade, right? And what should be happening in the transition plan along those
I believe
different
so.
levels. Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe it does too.
Yeah.
So
I just
that's a
love how
great.
it breaks down everybody's role as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's a great resource.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for your participation, and thanks Jake for the presentation and all the information. You're
Yeah.
really